going to pass to the second panel to bring our development partners to this very stage and discuss about what to expect, how we can cooperate with Ethiopia and other things. For this, it's my honor to invite Ashley Munro, Minister Counselor and Head of Development Cooperation at the Embassy of Canada to Ethiopia. Round of applause, please. You take the second seat, ma'am. Thank you. Mariam Salim is a World Bank Country Director for Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Sudan. Madam Mariam. Samuel Beidi Do, UNDP Resident Representative to Ethiopia. And last but not least, Tobias Rasmussen, IMF Resident Representative to Ethiopia. Again, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my single honor to invite the moderator of this event, Dr. Eyob Takaling, the State Minister of Finance of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia.
Welcome to this panel, conversation with our development partners. As you've been following this morning, this is a reform day. We're taking stock of Ethiopia's journey over the last 5-6 years. To have some reflection on this, I have a very distinguished panel with me. I will not go into their full CV, but I think it would be important to briefly introduce my panel. Ashley Mulrooney is a Minister Counselor and Executive Director of Canada's International Assistance Program to Ethiopia, one of Canada's largest programs. She was here since August 2023. She also serves, as you know, we have Development Assistance Group, DPG. Ashley is a co-chair of that group. In fact, Ashley worked in Canadian International Development Agency and the current Global Affairs Canada for about 20 years. Before she came here, she served in Ukraine, South Africa, Kenya, and Russia. She also oversaw Canada's international assistance to Ukraine from 2019 to 2023. Ashley, welcome. My second panelist is Mariam Salim. She's World Bank Country Director for Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Sudan. Ms. Salim is a Tanzanian national with over 25 years of experience as World Bank in the development field. Prior to this position, she was World Bank Country Manager for Cambodia and has held other positions, including Country Manager for Albania and Advisor in the Office of the Chief Executive Officer and Senior Vice President for Operations. And more interestingly, she is the daughter of Salim Ahmed Salim. I'm sure everybody knows Salim Ahmed Salim, a household name in Ethiopia, a former, when we talk of OAU, Salim Ahmed Salim comes to mind. Mariam, welcome back to Ethiopia again. And I have Samuel G. Doe, who has joined the UNDP country office in January 2024 after having served in South Sudan and Sierra Leone as resident representative. Originally from Liberia, Mr. Doe is conflict, peace, resilience, and development professional with wide-ranging international policy advisory and country office management experience. In addition to leading UNDP's Sierra Leone and South Sudan offices, he served as senior policy advisor and team leader on fragility, recovery, and resilience for the Bureau of Policy and Program Support and team leader in the Policy and Planning Division in UNDP in New York. He has also held several significant positions, so in the interest of time, I'll just say, Samuel, welcome to the panel. Last but not least, we have Tobias Rasmussen. Tobias is the IMF resident representative to Ethiopia. He has been with the IMF since 2001, working on a wide range of countries. Prior to his current assignment, He was resident representative to Kenya. He has also served as resident representative to Zambia and East Timor, and mission chief for Guinea-Bissau and Oman. Tobias, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, a reform day. Reform. This is a word that we've been, I think, listening every day in Ethiopian political economic discourse over the last 6 years. So I thought it might be better off if I start by asking you, a general reflection on this reform journey. What did you see? What did you observe over the last 6 years? A gentleman, as you can see, so I'll start with ladies. So ladies first. Mariam.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. It's a very critical time in Ethiopia's history, and it's indeed coming back home. So we welcomed the decision 6 years ago to move into a new phase of reforms with a more deliberate focus on transitioning the engine of growth from state to private sector, and from state-led investments to greater private sector investment in the economy for job creation. Despite an unprecedented level of shocks, COVID-19, 6 continuous years of drought, a once-in-generation locust infestation, conflict within the country and abroad, the country has persisted in reforms. The announcement of a new macroeconomic policy framework on July 29th was not only historic in its ambition, but a testament to the sheer determination to persist with reforms until they are done. There have been many achievements, not just in the economic space, but more broadly. The launch of a new digital ID system that will support better delivery of public services, improvements to rural land tenure that are supporting the country's poorest households, liberalizing trade and lifting cereal export restrictions, and more recently, a historic expansion of safety net spending and an increase in civil service wages. Lessons from other successful reforms highlight the importance of maintaining a broad reform agenda that goes beyond just the economy. And that is exactly what Ethiopia is doing. What is most important is that Ethiopia has and always will be in the driver's seat of this reform journey. These reforms come from years of strategic planning and deliberation by the country, and our role as partners has been to provide financial and technical support to help implement it. The revival of the reform agenda marks the start of a new phase for Ethiopia to look forward. But let me be clear, no country reforms overnight, and it will be a long road ahead of further measures to unlock the immense potential of Ethiopia and its people. A true acceleration of reforms will also require more deliberate effort from all stakeholders to forge peace and stability. Peace and prosperity are reinforcing of each other, and I am optimistic that we will see tangible gains and a revival of Ethiopia's impressive growth story in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Ashley?
Thank you, Dr. Ayub. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of all the bilateral development partners, and Malcolm Addiswalta. The social, political, economic, and service delivery reforms that you have launched over the last 6 years were both much needed and ambitious. You've taken a huge and courageous step in implementing the latest macroeconomic reform. And it's important for us to stress that as development partners, we'll be by your side as you roll out these challenging reforms and build the prosperous, inclusive society all Ethiopians deserve. The collective support we've seen across government for the currency liberalization and other macroeconomic reforms is a promising sign for us of our joint commitment to growing the Ethiopian economy and ensuring Ethiopia's most vulnerable share in Ethiopia's prosperity. I want to highlight a few other areas where important commitments and progress have been made, particularly related to peace, governance, and inclusion. First, the Pretoria Agreement. Peace deals require both sides to take a leap of faith. This one was no different. but it stopped the shooting and allowed Tigray and the country as a whole to look to the future once again. Second, the announcement of a plan to pursue transitional justice and address historic and more recent human rights violations. Only by confronting past atrocities and addressing the root causes of conflict can communities begin to heal, and can we hope that peace will hold. Third, the civil society law. By liberalizing the operating space for civil society actors and allowing them once again to access foreign funding and work on difficult issues such as human rights, you're on the path to building a more open and democratic society for all. Fourth, the decentralization of power to the regions, including fiscal decentralization. The adoption of the Intergovernmental Relations Law and the review of joint national regional revenues resulted in an average increase of regional revenues of 410%. Regional governments, like any government, need money to build roads and clinics and schools in the communities for Ethiopians in the communities where they live. Canada is proud to have supported this reform through the Forum of Federations. And fifth, efforts to protect the health and rights of women and girls. You've made promising commitments to end early and forced child marriage, to end female genital mutilation and cutting, and to provide extended health services for pregnant women, new mothers, and children. But here I must emphasize in particular how much work remains to be done before women and girls have full autonomy over their bodies and have the freedom and resources they need to reach their full potential. Ethiopia cannot meet its ambitious goals for growth if women and girls are not part of the equation. The many reforms implemented over the last years are impressive in their scope and their ambition. What's critical, however, and as Miriam mentioned, is how they're implemented. Any bureaucrat or politician can tell you that the planning and design phase is easy. What's infinitely more challenging is the delivery. So as you plan, I hope you'll take into account any capacity constraints you have, and this is where development partners can play a supporting role in helping you deliver on your commitments with technical assistance and expertise. Despite the challenges in recent years, Ethiopia is pursuing a reform agenda that should lead to more growth, less poverty, and better human development, provided peace and stability remain a priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tobias?
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I think the reform journey that Ethiopia embarked on 6 years ago has been enormously ambitious. It's a historic reform package that offers great potential. On the economic side, which is what I'll focus on, the goal of the reform agenda has been to create an open, competitive economy with a strong private sector that supports high economic growth and creates jobs and income for the population. The reform push clearly started strong. The agenda was laid out in the Homegrown Economic Reform Plan. This was a document that aimed to fundamentally transform the Ethiopian economy. It was all about creating a modern, vibrant economy with the private sector as growth engine. It was a plan with tremendous promise that garnered much international support, including from the International Monetary Fund and from other development partners. We at the IMF had a program in support of that economic reform plan that was launched in late 2019. I think it's fair to say that it has not been an easy journey, as we also heard from Miriam. There were big shocks along the way. We had the COVID-19 pandemic, domestic conflict, war in Ukraine, resulting increases in prices of key commodities, fuel, fertilizer. We had financial turmoil, tightening of financial conditions globally. This made for an exceptionally difficult period. But despite these challenges, important progress has been made to safeguard macroeconomic stability and lay a foundation for continued economic development. This has included tightening of monetary policy, reducing the fiscal deficit, and curtailing borrowing by state-owned enterprises. These were difficult, painful steps, but they have put the economy in a much better place. Inflation has over the past 3 years fallen from over 30% to below 20% in June. and public external debt has halved as a share of GDP. So coming out of this difficult period, we are now in a situation of much more promise and optimism on the economic front. The economic reform agenda is back on the front burner. In recent weeks, we've seen a series of truly historic reforms. The introduction of a modern interest rate-based monetary policy framework and the floating of the exchange rate. The economy is being open to foreign investment. A stock exchange is about to be launched. This is truly a historic time for Ethiopia on the economic front.
Thank you, Therese. Sam?
Thank you. As my colleagues have all underscored, the 6 years journey for reforms that Ethiopia has undertaken and the gains made are simply remarkable and historic. The Green Legacy Initiative, which was launched in 2019 to combat climate change and restore degraded landscapes through massive tree planting, has been exceptional and has exceeded all of its objectives. Over 33 billion trees have already been planted, and this has positioned Ethiopia as a global leader in reforestation. Progress already made on Ethiopia's food sovereignty initiative demonstrates a comprehensive approach. It underscores the importance of Ethiopia achieving what we call empirical sovereignty. Food sovereignty is empirical sovereignty. Already we've seen a skyrocketing growth in terms of wheat production. Private sector development and private sector-led economy is already showing good signs. The Ethiopia Capital Market Authority is up and running, increasing profitability of a lot of the state-owned enterprises as a result of the excellent work being done by the Ethiopia Investment Holdings. As strong indicators we're already seeing, a public-private partnership model that is being piloted in the energy sector is paving the way. We're hearing a lot about Made in Ethiopia initiative by the Ministry of Industry. A significant breakthrough has already been made also in digitalization, and the Honorable Minister spoke a lot about that. We've seen digital payment system that now has over 47 million users, the famous Telebear. Digital ID initiative is also making great progress. We've heard from the Commissioner of Civil Service. Civil service reform is on track. We hopefully will see increasing number of critical mass of skilled civil service. Citizens' participation in civil service performance management is one of the areas that the Commissioner is really emphasizing and underscoring. All of these are remarkable achievements, and I think it has put Ethiopia on the path in the continent unparalleled any other country in terms of the speed, the scale of the reforms that we've seen in the last 6 years. I want to stress that none of these, in our experience across the world, none of these large-scale groundswell of reforms can succeed or can even be initiated without leadership. And I want to emphasize leadership has driven these great achievements. And there are 4 key qualities of leadership that I've seen in my short time of being here that I believe are the key drivers of the reforms we've seen. Visionary, strategic leadership, result-oriented leadership, a leadership that is willing to embrace and manage resistance from these reforms, and a leadership that leads by example. So thank you very much, and I believe the path is bright. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really quite an impressive review of the last 6 years. I was trying to catch some phrases, but it was difficult to catch up with you. Remarkable, impressive in stock and ambition, historic, speed, delivery. It's not just about the content of the reform, but how it was delivered. Really, this country had undergone sweeping reforms across political, social, and economic spheres. The magnitude of the reform, as we are trying to take stock of things, some of the things we probably have forgotten. I'm talking about land reform, some of the social reforms, because we've been reforming every day. In fact, we probably have lost track of some of this. But really, it has been a fascinating journey, and doing multiple things at a time. I mean, like today, by the way, the ministers had to run out because of some conflicting schedule that just came up. And they have apologized. They'll try and come back before we conclude. But it just tells you how multifaceted and deep the reform had been. Thank you so much for taking stock of that. But I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the recent reform. Tobias, I'll come to you on the macro front. Recently, as you know, we have embarked into full-fledged macro reform. What are your views on this reform? What role do they play in laying the ground for sustainable development in Ethiopia?
So, the macroeconomic reforms that Ethiopia has launched are transforming the economy. They offer great promise to improve livelihoods for the population for years to come. A key recent step was the move at the end of July here to a market-based determination of the exchange rate. This reform will alleviate the acute shortages of foreign exchange that previously existed, and it will promote export and investment activity. The reforms that are underway are extensive and will inevitably imply significant changes for the population. Over time, as the reforms take hold, people will benefit from increased economic activity and increased scope for public spending in priority areas. In the near term, though, the change in exchange rate regime may lead to some imported commodities becoming more expensive. An important element of the authorities' reform agenda, therefore, is that it includes measures to mitigate these impacts. In particular, the economic framework includes a spending package of about 1.5 percentage points of GDP for this fiscal year, which will pay for an expansion of the social safety net programs, as well as temporary subsidies for key products such as fuel and fertilizer. Ethiopia's reform program is supported by an IMF extended credit facility that was approved by the IMF board on July 29. It is a 4-year arrangement which provides financing of $3.4 billion US dollars, of which about $1 billion US dollars was disbursed immediately after board approval. Financing under the ECF is provided with a low, currently zero interest rate. Alongside the IMF, support for Ethiopia's reform program is also being provided in roughly equal magnitude by the World Bank in the form of budget support and from external creditors in the form of debt relief. In total, the financing package for the 4-year program amounts to $10.7 billion US dollars. As Ethiopia's development partners, all of us here on this panel, are here to support Ethiopia's reform journey. But an important point to make here is that this is Ethiopia's reform agenda. It is truly homegrown. We support the homegrown economic reform agenda because we believe it makes sense and is good for Ethiopia.
Thank you so much, Tobias. Sam, I'll come back to you, but Miriam, maybe so that we can build on this. We talk about broader macro reform, but if you take stock of Ethiopia's reform journey, you see that Ethiopia's government has invested significantly on pro-poor sectors. even in the recent reform, we have prioritized social protection as critical area. I want you to reflect on this commitment. How significant is this commitment, given your extensive experience elsewhere?
Ethiopia has, for a long time, been known for its high level of pro-poor spending. So let's all remember that. Unfortunately, declining fiscal space in recent years has been a significant constraint. But we are really pleased to see a determined effort to reverse this trend with the recent reform announcements. Safety nets are a critical poverty reduction tool, especially during shocks. Since their establishment nearly 2 decades ago, Ethiopia's safety net programs have done an impressive job of reducing poverty and adapting to changing circumstances such as famine, conflict, displacement, and other climate events. But they have also been primarily funded by development partners, with only small shares financed from the government budget. Lessons from other countries illustrate that safety nets need to be well targeted and adequate, sustainably financed, and cannot substitute for macroeconomic reform, sustainable growth and job creation, and for basic social welfare policies such as health and education. To address these challenges from this year onwards, as mentioned, the government will finance the full core safety net program through a nearly 5-fold increase in the budget for safety nets and a maintenance of that budget at consistent levels over time. These resources, combined with existing development partner assistance, will enable an expansion of both the payments that current beneficiaries are receiving and an expansion in how many people can be supported in various safety net programs. The focus will also be on improving the management and targeting of safety nets. This speaks volumes for Ethiopia's commitment to pro-poor spending. Few comparator countries of Ethiopia regionally or at its current level of income have invested in safety nets and pro-poor spending in the way that Ethiopia has. I also wanted to take this opportunity to tackle a myth that because of Ethiopia's agreements with the IMF and the World Bank, that there will be a period of deep austerity with severe consequences for people. In fact, as even Tobias just mentioned, we are expecting to see an ambitious expansion of public spending in the coming years, especially in pro-poor areas such as safety nets and the revival of recurrent spending in such sectors as health, education, and water. This will be supported by the government's own efforts to raise revenues, which have declined severely in recent years, and through financial support from other development partners, such as the World Bank and the IMF. And while the government is working to improve tax collection and reduce losses in the electricity sector through higher tariffs, both these measures include important pro-poor protection measures, such as VAT exemptions for essential commodities consumed by the poor, and through a highly effective social electricity tariff designed to buffer the lowest consumers of electricity, who are the poorest. In our experience, one of the most important lessons we have learned when looking at successful economic transitions from state to private sector-led growth is the preservation of strong and effective state capacity. What was critical in the case of success stories, for examples in Eastern Europe and East Asia, was that the state played a vital role in supporting people through the transition process and enabling the private sector to thrive. Safety nets and other type of pro-poor spending are critical to this process because they increase inclusion, allow a greater economic participation, and help ensure that the benefits of growth are widely shared. It will also ensure that no one gets left behind, as there will always be people and vulnerable groups of the population that require protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. You reminded me of one statistics. About 61% of our GDP is spent on proper sectors. If you look at the last 7-8 years average, for instance, education is about 23-24%, health 8, 9%, agriculture over 12%, roads over 10%. Really, the investment has been significantly poor. But how this reform actually has put the poor at the center is fascinating. The wage bill increase, as you've indicated, safety net expansion, all those subsidies that we're providing. It shows the focus of this government on the poor in particular. But one other thing that I found a little bit fascinating is this homegrown nature of the reform. You kept on saying this is Ethiopia's reform. Sam, when you talk about ownership, public engagement is critical, right? Especially for those difficult sectors in the private sector, boosting productivity, innovation, financial sector reforms. These require private sector buy-in. So please tell us your views about both public and private sector buy-in for reform success, and then what challenge do you observe and what opportunities do you see?
Thank you. As you rightly said, engaging citizens, engaging the private sector in the groundswell of reforms we are undertaking is absolutely indispensable. It is important for sustainability of all of these reforms and the reforms gains. There are 6 reasons why engaging the public, engaging the private sector can effectuate, can achieve and sustain the gains. First is effectiveness. If the public is on board, if the private sector is on board, they can drive achievement. And we've seen this model of public engagement, especially in the Green Legacy, the tree planting initiative, is an excellent model of people's engagement and a clarion call to people. And that model, I think, if all of the other segments of the reforms can apply that, we can achieve the results you are looking for effectiveness. Secondly, public and private engagement can enhance trust and foster legitimacy in the process that is underway. Reforms are volatile. Reforms are difficult. Reforms have oppositions in public. So engagement, communication, is space that allows that, can strengthen the legitimacy in the process. And this is very important. Third, it helps to facilitate compliance and to forge participation nationwide. And it's important to engage the public. Fourth, it contributes to a stronger social cohesion. Every reform, whether it's in Ethiopia or even in Western countries, reforms have the risk of social fragmentation. It has the risk of intensifying conflicts in society. So by public engagement, public dialogue can turn that around and foster cohesion, foster social relations across groups. That is an important ingredient one gets through the engagement process. Fifth, it helps to spur investment. If the private sector is on board with all of the reforms efforts, if the regulations that they expect are enhanced, you can attract a lot of investment back in the country. But most importantly, the question that all leaders who embark on reforms ask is, will this reform stick even when I'm gone? The sustainability challenge is in the people. If the people internalize the reforms, they can dictate to any other leader the path they want to take in the reforms effort. For sustainability, people-driven reform can guarantee that effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. People-driven reform. So reform for the people, by the people, to the people. Ashley, I want you to wear your DPG co-chair hat now. These reforms have transformative impact, no question about it. They would unlock substantial economic potential. For this to happen, what role do you foresee for development partners in facilitating this process? What forms of collaboration should we expect in this context?
Thank you. So I think, first of all, it's important that development partners follow the government's lead and really align our priorities with yours. In terms of collaboration, we can share advice and expertise, we can provide counterpart financing, and we can promote the reforms to our investors from our home countries. But as others have said in this panel, we need to see the government of Ethiopia in the driver's seat, truly taking ownership, especially when it comes to building an enabling environment for the private sector and guaranteeing peace and security. Without these efforts, the engagement of development partners will have limited impact. Development partners can continue to complement some of the important mitigating measures of the reforms to ensure the most vulnerable are protected from shocks, much like Miriam said, including continuing and even enhancing our support to the Public Safety Nets program. The government of Ethiopia should be applauded for its historic commitment to the PSNP, and increasing development partner funding to PSNP in tandem would allow us to reach more people and increase the impact of these reforms. One of the steps Canada is taking is to support financial inclusion to ensure that more people have access to the financing they need to start businesses and grow the economy. For example, our psychometrics-based lending has doubled the likelihood that women will receive a business loan from a bank or a microfinance institution in the last 3 years, from 42% to 90%. Through the World Bank and the Center for Accelerated Women's Economic Empowerment, Canada is also supporting women exporters. In this way, Ethiopia benefits from best international practice through donor support, and we can help traditionally disadvantaged groups benefit from opportunities they might otherwise miss. The bottom line for me is that development partners are here because we want to see Ethiopia thrive, and we want to support you on that path.